Hi, everybody. I'm Jeremy Fuster. I'm a film reporter at TheWrap, and we're really happy to have you here for our 2021 Awards and International Screening Series. And today, we're really excited to bring you the latest film from Cartoon Saloon, WOLFWALKERS, which is one of this year's contenders for the Best Animated Feature category. We're going to be showing you a trailer of the movie, then we'll go right into a conversation with the directors of the film, Ross Stewart and Tom Moore. And to our audience, please participate in the live chat at the screen. Go ahead and share your thoughts about the film, and let us know where everybody's tuning in from. And before we introduce our guests, here is the trailer for WOLFWALKERS.
Wolf, wolf, hunt them far and yonder.
The forest is brimming with wolves. It's my job to hunt them down, not yours.
But we could hunt them together. Wolves, bears, dragons even.
She's one of them wolf-walkers.
Wolfwalkers.
The ones that can talk to wolves with some wild magic.
We can come out now. We can smell ya, you stink. You're a wolfwalker. You're a wolf when you sleep. A girl when you're awake. Robin, something's happened to me. Yeah, I can see that. Flippin' great. You're a wolf now. Be a wolf. The wolves are getting smaller every day.
These wolves, they're just beasts. Tonight we put an end to this. I promise your mother to kill you safe.
I have to help her. You have to leave. No break. I scared him off.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce the directors of the film, Ross Stewart, and co-founder of Cartoon Saloon, Tom Moore. Hey guys, welcome. Thanks a lot for coming on. This really is an amazing film. Like, the trailer doesn't do justice, and the trailer looks amazing. But well, let's start with this. So by this point, this is your fourth film, I believe, and by this point, you guys have done a really great job creating this very distinctive Cartoon Saloon style. It started with The Secret of Kells, then later with Song of the Sea. When you guys did WOLFWALKERS, how did you want to push that style forward?
I guess it was stuff that Ross and I had started exploring way back with Secret of Kells, trying to push the visual language of hand-drawn animation to be as expressive as possible. And something else that Ross and I have done over the course of the different projects we've worked on together is taken influence from artists or illustrators from the time period or from the region that it was set. So we kind of took influence from some of the woodblock prints from that time period, and we tried to build a visual language where we were very clearly using all the tricks in our toolbox as hand-drawn animators to tell the story as expressively as possible.
And also, as I watch this film, I also understand that one of your big inspirations for this film was the Richard Williams film, The Thief and the Cobbler. Now, for our viewers, I highly recommend that you look up this film on YouTube. The Thief and the Cobbler is a remarkable film, but it was a film that I could see there was a lot of things that inspired this movie in terms of like some of the shots of the city, with the way the city just looks, it all fits into like a big rectangle and things like that. If you could just tell us a little bit about that film, and then sort of how it inspired you with some of the little tricks that you did with some of the optical illusions and how you portray the city and the forest and things like that.
I think Thief and the Cobbler has been an inspiration since we were in college, and it was a huge inspiration for Secret of Kells as well. And like you say, like using animation to create like optical illusions to really like flatten perspective, or to have your character like enclosed in visual language if you need to. You know, there's so many amazing things that are done in Thief and the Cobbler that we would have been first just in awe of, saying like, how could they do that? Like the amount of work, and then slowly maybe trying our own little tricks as to how we could reinterpret some of those animation techniques and use them for our benefit. But yeah, it's an amazing film.
I remember on Secret of Kells, we talked about how Richard Williams had always seen animation as an art form, and it could be both commercial and artistic at the same time. And he had made a kind of a virtuoso approach to animating everything. Like the whole screen could animate. You could fly through the city in 3 dimensions, even though it was hand drawn, and then it could flatten back out to just looking like a Persian miniature, you know. And so that was something that was way beyond our kind of budget and probably even our skill set for the first couple of movies that I directed or co-directed. But on this, we decided to give it a go. And so for the Wolf Vision sequence, I think we got almost as crazy as Dick Williams with our camera moving through a hand-drawn environment. And I think that the final result, even though we used computers as a guide to kind of plan out the shots, was as crazy as Dick Williams. We were drawing on paper, you know, 12 or 24 frames a second, the entire forest or city or whatever the wolf was seeing as the wolf character moved through the environment. And for us, that was sort of felt that, okay, that now we're getting a little bit closer to the artistry and technical proficiency that Dick Williams had in his studio back in the 60s and 70s, you know.
Yeah, and there are so many shots of this movie. Like you hit a pause at any point in this movie, and it feels like something that you could put on a wall. It's really impressive. In some of those shots, what sort of came first when coming up with some of these different shots that you did to establish the forest or the city? Like, did the idea of making like these sharp angles for the city and more curves for the forest, was that something that came on early in the process? Was there a little bit of experimentation that went with that?
Yeah, the visual language and the style guide would have been done very, very early on. Like, I mean, even when Tom and myself were writing the script, we would have come up with an idea of the kind of visual language that we wanted. And then every time a concept artist would come on, they would bring a little bit more to it. And then when we had a scene illustration department doing scene illustrations for key moments in the film, they would have had a huge impact into how, say, trees would have been drawn, how the city might have been drawn from a distance, all of those kind of things. But really, what you're referring to, where every single frame might look a certain way, that I think a lot of that comes down to the storyboarding and the layout. You know, the storyboarders would try and interpret a scene and try and like think of cinematography that would suit that the tone of that scene or the mood of that scene or like the character's emotional journey. And then after that, the layout artist would have to reinterpret that storyboard and try and fit it into our style guide and into our visual language, you know.
Well, let's talk. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeremy. It's fine.
Well, let's talk about the storyboarding for probably the highlight of the movie, the running with the wolves scene, because there's so many different ideas and so much visual language coming out of that scene. One thing I think in particular that really stood out for me was the way you portray Robin's heightened senses when she's in her wolf form, with these little paint strokes, like and black background and then painted strokes of all the little animals. When storyboarding that scene, like, what was the idea of showing those senses early? Was that early in the storyboarding process, or did it come later on? Like, how long did it take to put that big scene together?
That scene was definitely in production during most of the course of the production of the movie, because we knew that was our kind of tentpole moment where we were showing the audience how amazing it was for Robin to be so free as a wolf and to discover all these new powers. And it kind of has every technique that we used throughout the movie storyboarded into it. Really talented guy, Guillaume Laurent, who's a French animation director himself, came and worked with us, and we asked him to storyboard that sequence, and he brought this sense of it almost being like a moment of mindfulness. What was only a few lines in the script was kind of expanded out, and we realized at a certain point we wanted it to be kind of a musical, wordless sequence where we're just with Robin as she enjoys her new body that she's in. And we found the Aurora song, and we started to work to that. And so the editors and with Guillaume's storyboards, we did quite a few passes till we got it the right length and had figured out how to show what we wanted to show, whether it was Robin's new sense of hearing, or whether it was the world through her eyes, or just the beauty of the forest from a third-person point of view of the two girls and the pack of wolves running through it. We took a lot of inspiration from the movie The Tale of Princess Kaguya, because we wanted it to feel really expressive and really joyful. And Maria Pareja, who was our kind of co-art director, took an overview of that whole sequence and worked out the colors and the style and all. So it really was Ross and I sort of trying to guide some of our most talented artists in our team to really go for all take it up to 11 in a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of all the tricks and ideas that we had in the visual language side. And yeah, it includes some of those wolf vision shots I spoke to earlier that are about, you're seeing the world animated. And I know in CG animation we've gotten so used to that, but in hand-drawn animation it's a crazy undertaking where you have to draw each tree getting closer and each branch and each leaf on each branch. And drawing a scene like that for a hand-drawn animator is a mammoth task. We kind of hope that it kind of gives a lift to the audience who've been living in this fairly flat world with Robin until then. We see that the whole world and her whole point of view and her whole experience has completely changed, and she can never go back after that.
And you talk about the difficulty in animating that. I have to imagine, along with the trees, just that the whole pack of wolves just moving, like where it feels like it's just this one big mass, but you also have to make sure that it feels like they're also individual little creatures. So I imagine like that too had to have been a real challenge to animate, to keep that balance.
Yeah, I think like from very early on, even when we were doing the concept trailer, we had an idea that the wolves might move very fluidly, almost like water or liquid. And we tried out a couple of animation experiments or animation, like little test scenes. But really, when that all gelled was when we had our one of our main character designers, Federico Paravano, come over, and he did animation tests with the updated characters. And there was one animation test that he did where all the wolves were just swarming around, like almost like a ball of worms or something, and they were just squirming around each other, and little Maeve was popping up in the middle, and they moved like such a kind of like a liquid mass that we were like, oh wow, that's amazing. We have to try and get the wolves to move like that when they're at their wildest or when they're at their freest, But as you say, the individual animators, they need to be aware of like legs popping out and structure and things like that. So there's a very fine balance to get. But luckily, we just had some amazing animators working on the team that were able to pull it off.
Yeah, that sequence was one where we had kind of guest star animator James Baxter do a couple of shots, which he's an amazing animator, and he did a workshop for our team on quadruped animation, like how to animate wolves and act with four-legged animals at the same time. And so I think just having him do a couple of shots in that sequence raised everybody's game. And it's amazing to me to see that a lot of our animators in the studio in Kilkenny who wouldn't have the same experience and all as James were able to match the shots that he did in that sequence. And I think it's lovely to see that they can go from naturalistic, anatomically correct, four-legged animal animation to very expressive, fluid, cartoony. And I think that's some of the stuff that's really special in hand-drawn. It'd be a much trickier thing to try and do that with CG. And I think it kind of speaks to how much more expressive hand-drawn animation can be.
It's really amazing how your team was able to sort of rise to meet the moment. It really paid off in a great way. And you also mentioned finding the Aurora song, which I believe came out like 2013 or 2014. But then she actually came in and did a new version of it. What was that process like for you? When did you guys decide, like, okay, we want to do a version of the song specifically for this movie, and what changes did did your team and Aurora really want to make to meet that moment in the movie?
Yeah, I stumbled on the song one day when I was out jogging while we were working on the storyboards, and it was at that time we knew that moment needed a musical lift, and the song just seemed so perfect. And even though when we first cut it in, there was a few raised eyebrows because it's quite a pop song, and nobody really would have imagined that we would have a kind of showstopper, pop song in the middle of one of our movies. It's not the kind of style of movie that we usually make. But I was pretty convinced, and Ross too, that like working with our composer Bruno and the band Keela, that we could make the song feel fairly seamless to the rest of the score. And we were just hoping that Aurora would be willing to work with us on it. And she was, thankfully, and she did a version that adjusted some of the words to make it even more perfect for the movie. But it's essentially a version of that original song that I heard. And what was lovely, I think, is that there's a quality to Aurora's voice that to me and Ross, I think, felt like the inner world of Robin, our main character. We were hearing, like, it adds a level of excitement and just being in the moment that we wanted to get across, that I think it kind of fit perfectly.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about Robin, you've had a lot of great voice actors on these Cartoon Saloon films, but it feels like the voice acting in this film, particularly for Robin and May, was so key to this movie, that chemistry between those two characters, the whole story hinges on it. So you found Honor Neefsey and Ava Whitaker. How did you guys come across these two? Did they record in the studio together? What was the process of recording the script with them?
Can you speak to that, Ross?
Well, we worked with a casting agency, Louise Kiley, direct casting, and she put a call out for child actors from all across the UK and Ireland for those two characters. Sorry, my cat is interrupting this.
Oh.
And yeah, I mean, it was hard enough to find the perfect matches, and we were really lucky that Honor and Eva had just done had submitted their casting tapes just when they did, because I don't know if we would have been able to find such perfect match. And the fact that they played off each other quite well in their voice record too, they really got on well, and they were friendly amidst this group of adults. So you kind of, that spontaneous kind of friendship just comes across in the recording.
Yeah, I think it's so important that in all the films I've directed or co-directed, we've always tried to have the actors all together as much as possible, and do a few sessions where you might spend a week with the actors, warming up and trying the lines, and then come back together again for the final record. And we're really lucky that with Honor and Ava, that over the course of them working together, they became such friends. And I think that comes across in the movie, that they're really in the room together. They're not in separate booths, or they're not adults impersonating kids. It's two real kids really getting to know each other, and we kind of captured that kind of lightning in the bottle or whatever by working with them. And it's the kind of thing that unfortunately isn't possible now during COVID times. So I really hope that if we make another movie again, we'd have everybody all together like that, because I think it's something extra authentic.
And there are a lot of themes in this movie. There's matriarchy, religion, environmentalism. One thing in particular that I noticed after I saw the film was I learned that in Ireland that there have been some politicians in the Green Party that were pushing to reintroduce the wolves to Ireland, because wolves haven't actually been in Ireland for over 250 years. Tommy, you mentioned in other interviews that climate change was a major factor behind wanting to do this movie. But over the course of making this movie and perhaps screening it in Ireland, has it made you more sensitive to environmental issues specifically in Ireland, or has it been brought up with other Irish viewers? What has the reaction been like in your country, particularly in relationship to that issue?
I think I'm a little bit sad that we haven't been able to have live screenings and meet audiences and have these kind of discussions offline, because I do think that there's a certain climate. Like, my wife is a member of the Green Party, and so am I. There's a lot of people that are inspired by people like George Moneybo in the UK, who speaks to rewilding. And I think that there is a growing movement. I mean, our National Forestry Quilta has started a new initiative where they're going to try and have people invest in just growing wild native forests that are just left alone. They're not managed or, you know, in any way that's intrusive or commercial, that they're just allowing wildness to come back. And I think that is part of healing the biodiversity problem and the kind of stuff that's been kind of choking the environmental movement, where everything had to be quantified with a value, that we kind of tried to convince people that it was worth saving the environment because it was worth X amount of money. And I think there's a kind of spiritual and cultural shift that is the kind of proposal to reintroduce wolves, that it's a shift towards this stuff is worth keeping just for itself. It's got a value in and of itself, even if it doesn't have a particular monetary value attached to it. And I hope that that kind of discussion is galvanized or encouraged or inspired by movies like WOLFWALKERS. I hope we can be a positive part of that discussion.
And this is now the third movie you've done inspired by Irish history and folklore. You've explored so many different parts of it already. Is there anything else that even at this point that you're still thinking, even if you don't know exactly how, that you'd be interested in exploring? Any idea of what might be in store for the future of Cartoon Saloon?
Well, I mean, Cartoon Saloon is busy. Like, our next project is a movie based on Puff and Rock, which is a series that's on Netflix for little kids, and it's a feature film kind of dealing with, in a gentle way for little kids, the idea of climate refugees, where animals and people are going to have to move from one part of the world to another because of climate change. And then Nora Toomey's working on a movie called My Father's Dragon for Netflix. So the studio is busy. For me personally, my interest now seems to be leaning towards the crossover between Irish and other cultures. I'm so interested in all stories from Irish history where we came in contact with other cultures and what we learned from each other. And that's something that I'm leaning towards, but honestly, I'm taking a break for a while and just thinking what the next project might be. I don't know if Ross has any new ideas along those lines too.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be, I'd like to take a break too and go back to painting and maybe illustrating and doing stuff like that. But there is a project that I'm hopefully going to get involved with a composer here, Michael Gallen, and it's kind of an audio musical journey exploring. There are these folk healers up in Cavan, up in Monaghan, where he's from, and they. Some of them are crazy stories, but they have they'll have a certain family that will be able to heal warts, or a certain family that will be able to heal whatever epilepsy and stuff, and it's all to do with just having faith in this little kind of magic ritual. So he's exploring that, and he wanted me to do some animation, which will be broadcast live, I think, like a performance and stuff. But he's hoping to work with me on that. So that's the next thing I have lined up. But in between that, I'll be painting and doing some fun things.
Well, Tom, Ross, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for making this really amazing and thoughtful movie. It's really fantastic. Everyone, you can check it out at Apple TV Plus. It's streaming on there now. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's great to have you all. Be sure to take advantage of our free trial to Wrap Pro and be the first to know more about upcoming Wrap screenings and events. And you can also check back on our screenings page at screenings.thewrap.com as well.